It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword.
Welcome to the Double Stop Podcast. I'm Brian Sword. This week, we've got bassist Marco Mendoza. Now, he's played in a whole bunch of cool bands. Whitesnake, Thin Lizzy, Black Star Riders, Lynch Mob, all kinds of cool stuff, including 2 solo albums, which are also really great. Now, one of the things I planned on asking Marco about was something he put in the liner notes on the Lynch Mob Smoke and Mirror CD. I'll read it out. "Thank you God for sobriety, for the best 22 years of my life." That one comment clearly indicates a history. Well, I didn't get a chance to ask him about it because he opened up on his own, and he really opened up. And it was a very brave and honest sharing of a pretty dark past. And he didn't hold back. He bared it all in the hopes that perhaps he could help just one person. So this episode really covers the descent and the recovery of Marco Mendoza.
I grew up in Tijuana, Baja California, south of the border of San Diego. Back in those days, people had dual citizenship. So we were born in San Diego. Both my brother and my sister, Carlos and Linda, we were born there. And then we were living south of the border. My father was working in the U.S. in San Diego. He's a BFW veteran of the WW2. And so he had a gig with Convair, General Dynamics, working on aerospace engineering and all that. It was a great gig. But, you know, coming from 3 generations of Mexican, Spanish, American families, we were living down there. So I grew up in Tijuana, Baja California. And that's where, I have to say, that's where most of my my music influences came from. I grew up listening to Brazilian grooves and Afro-Cuban grooves and Mexican music and boleros from South America, and just a widespread spectrum of music styles and genres. Then my grandmother came, my parents divorced and separated, and my grandma came to take care of us. And along with her, she brought a piano. She was a classical pianist, and she was a teacher as well. So she influenced me on the classical side and really sat me down and played all this beautiful music, Tchaikovsky and Chopin and Bach, and then that's where I really learned how to listen to music and understand melodies and harmonies and counterpoint and all that. And she explained it to me in an easy way. I was a kid, but I found more interest in music that way, you know. And of course, like every teenager, you know, the English invasion happened, and one Christmas we got. Now you got to understand, in Mexico, everything is like 5 to 10 years behind the times. It's just a fact. It's better now because of the internet and all that, but in those days. So we got one Christmas, we got Abbey Road, and I want to say it was like 4 or 5 years later after the album was released, Abbey Road. And my dad was one of those cats where he loved music. He was also a clarinet player, and he loved big bands. So we had Benny Goodman and Glenn Miller and all, you know, all the big band stuff playing in the house. And then even when I was younger, my mom was a singer, professional singer as well. And she loved musical theater. So we had Carousel, The King and I, South Pacific, and to Oklahoma, to name a few, and more. So we had music. I mean, I grew up listening to music, all styles, all genres. And but I got to say, until I got turned on to rock and roll and the Beatles, that's when it got my interest, you know, and I started getting into playing a little bit of guitar and and a little bit of piano, but I just didn't have the patience and or the focus to really get into piano playing and classical because it was just so strict and so disciplined. I was more of I would spend a lot of time on my own with the guitar, breaking the songs down and learning more chords. And I realized that a lot of my favorite songs really only involved three or four chords. So let's just say that I could get around the guitar much easier.
When did you make the switch over to bass?
Bass, okay, so the transition came, my father surrounded us with instruments, and he even built, in the garage, he built a little room for us, a band room, So
Oh, cool.
my brother showed interest in drum playing, and he started playing drums. I started playing guitar, and we had some friends that played bass and guitar, and we got together, and the name of that band was the Peace Association. Yeah, baby. And it's so cool. And I remember we used to come across the border, stay with my aunt in San Diego in Chula Vista, and we went to high school in Chula Vista, and that's where we met a lot more cats I used to play, and we started playing school dances and little parties here and there. And so that just kind of like pumped my interest because it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I remember wanting to learn more songs and practicing, and I was just excited about the whole process. And the other guys would just put their time in, a couple hours, and then they were done. Excuse me, but me, I wanted more. I've always had that personality, the compulsive, obsessive. If I like something, I like it more, and I want to do it. In this case, it was good because I got to say I learned a lot in a short period of time, and I started advancing like much quicker. Shortly after, I started singing. So at that point, I was playing rhythm guitar, playing a little bit of lead, not a whole lot, but singing. And the songs that were being played on the radio were, CCR, Queen's Clearwater Revival was a big influence. So I learned to sing and play a lot of those songs. And then Grand Funk Railroad was really happening. We got into that. And Savoy Brown and Allman Brothers Band and a little bit of Zeppelin and everything else. We got exposed to the English invasion years later, but I found that I was really interested in Deep Purple and all those bands that were coming from England, Whitesnake after a while. But so there was another band in the hood in my neighborhood that was a few years ahead of us. They had a PA, they had transportation, they were already doing better, official professional gigs. They were doing the bigger concerts, and their bass player left. And by then I had built a bit of a reputation of singing and playing guitar, and they needed a bass player that sang. And so they approached me and said, we need a bass player. You want to audition? And it's great that you sing because we need another singer. And I said, yes, of course. And I'd never played bass by that time. It was all guitar. And so I told my dad, and we went to the nearest pawn shop and bought a cheap bass. I don't even remember if it even had a brand, And we got it, and I learned their 5-6 songs that they gave me to learn. And I learned the vocals, the lead vocals, and the bass. And let's just say that I passed the audition, and I became part of that band. We kept the name because they preferred the name that we had, Peace Association. And then my brother started playing with us too. He got the gig along with me. And then shortly after, my brother went to live in the U.S. with my mom, so he left the band, and then we got another drummer. But that was the beginning of my career. Up to that point, it was just a hobby. I was still going to school. And then I realized that that's around that period is when I realized, I knew it in my gut that this was something that was going to grow. It was going to be something that was going to be a part of my life, because I really was digging it. And we were starting to get paid a little bit. I'm going, wow, this could be cool. Well, let's just say that I met my first wife, Beatrice, and we were dating. I felt head over heels for her, and I decided to get married at the ripe age of 16 years old. I know, man. Looking back now, I'm going, what the hell was going on with my brain? But I was that kind of kid. And I remember falling madly in love with her. And she was 22. She was together. She came to visit with my cousin from Mexico City. And long story short, I told my dad, I was living with my dad at that time, and I told my dad, Dad, I really want to get married to Beatrice. And he laughed and gave me the talk and explained how things were and how my life was going to change. But he never kept me from doing it. You know, that's how cool he was, I think. So we got married, and then from that point on, his thing was, okay, you want to be a big man, you want to grow up, you want to have a family, you want to be a husband, a father, you have to move out. So
Yeah.
so I quit school and I started hustling in the music business. And we started working and we started doing more gigs. And I made a bit of a living, you know, not earning too much money, but enough for us to have a little pad. And my son, Marco, was born. Before that, I got recruited by another band that was nationally known. And they already had, you know, albums and recorded, and they're pretty well known, pretty famous. So for me, it was like, wow, these guys want me to be part of this. And so I joined the band, and then we started traveling through Mexico. It was like the first professional gig that I had, touring band that I had. And we ended up going to Mexico City. We got married. We had my son, Marco. And by the age of 17, he was born. And then,
Wow.
yeah, I know. But by then, I was doing music full time. I never finished high school. And there's all these little details that I forget about. But let's just say that I jumped in full on, and it became a career move for me. And it's been great. It's been a great, great, great journey. Unbelievable, you know.
At 17, to be married with a child, the stakes are now very, very high.
Very high, very different. And I think that was part of it, Brian, that really gave me the motivation and the incentive to really get serious about. So it worked for me because I remember shedding more, and I remember spending more time with my guitar, with my bass and the guitar, and developing new skills, because music, in my opinion, is what it is. It's like anything else, like sports. If you want to become better or good at something, you got to spend time with it. And so I was really, I delved myself big time into it, because I realized I was now supporting my family with my career. So it worked for me. And you know, I don't suggest that to anybody. I mean, get married that young is a trip. I have two beautiful kids, Marco, who is a bass player now, who's got 3 Grammys, and my daughter Eva from that marriage, and I love it, man. It's been a fast moving journey there with my first wife, you know. Along the way, let's just say, because you pointed out that's pretty young and the stakes are high. Let's just say that I was, there's no manuals or there's no training that you get before you get on the road with a major act. And that kind of teaches you how to deal with the dynamics, which is, you know, all of a sudden you have a bit of fame and people recognize you, and then you have a little bit of money, and then you have all the party favors that come along, all the alcohol and the drugs. And then at home, I have a wife and a kid. It was like a lot of responsibility for a 17-year-old. And so I learned how to numb myself and deal with life through alcohol and drugs, you know, and which really got out of control there for like 9 years, really bad. Things got heavy. I ended up getting a divorce. The gigs got better, and the money got better, and all that comes with it. And my wife just couldn't deal with the lifestyle, you know. This lifestyle is not for everybody.
Oh, no, not at all.
I made a decision to jump into it, and I to this day, I enjoy the whole process. I enjoy all of it. I've learned to appreciate it, and but she didn't sign up for that. She signed up to get married and have a family and raise a family and have a little house with a picket fence, and you know what I mean. And so and I don't blame her, to be honest. If I was on the other side, I'd probably do the same. So she walked. By then we had 2 kids, and she took my kids to Mexico, and I was in California already, and That was the end of that first marriage. 4 years later, divorce, and which allowed me to go even further out of control. And I got into heavier drugs, heroin and cocaine and alcohol and pills,
Oh,
smoke, and anything and everything I could get my hands on in order, they were my tools to deal with life,
and you're in your mid-20s?
At this point, I'm 19, 20, I would say. Things happened fast. Things were moving really,
Yeah.
yeah. And so it got there's a few years where I honestly, it's a big blur because you've heard it said before, you get into this, you get into this comatose state of mind. You're just functioning, you're barely existing, and you're just doing whatever gets in front of you, but you're not there. Heroin addiction and cocaine addiction becomes the number one priority, and on a daily basis. That's you wake up, if you wake up or come to, and first priority, first on the list is, do I have some stuff? If I don't, where can I get more? And do I have enough to last me a few days, or how much do I need to get? It's just insane, that circle, And so music became a secondary thing, and I got lost in the shuffle there. In the process, I met my second wife. She was also involved in that lifestyle, the drugs, alcohol, partying, and all that. And that's how we met. That's how we gravitated towards each other. And then we had my son, Aaron. That lasted a few years, real quick. And then I was off and running again, out of control, and hit a bottom and came to sobriety, came into recovery, and my life, that I choose to say, and I really believe this in my gut, that's when my life really started. Everything before that was beautiful. There were some highlights. There were some things that I'll embrace for the rest of my life, and beautiful moments, but there was a lot of bad and out of control stuff. So I got sober in 1986, and my life became then, it began then in sobriety, and my career just started getting serious and more focused, and here I am again.
Clearly, everything you've explained so far, it's all or nothing. Like, whatever it is you're doing, you're diving in.
Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that. That's been part of, it's part of my personality, and I've learned to kind of mellow. I've learned to kind of walk the middle ground a little better,
Perhaps I'm digging too deep, but
Not at all, not at all.
when you talk about rock bottom that turned you around,
Yeah.
what's that rock bottom look like?
My rock bottom is something I sometimes don't like to talk about the details, because being a recovering alcoholic addict now, I understand that, whatever we went through, the war stories, and it's part of the process. Some of us have to hit those rock bottoms, and they're all different. But the solution is the same. The solution is recovery and sobriety. And so we like to focus on that. We know the problem. We like to focus on the solution. For me, without getting into details, because that's another book. That's a 2-hour conversation. No, seriously, man, it's pretty heavy. Things got out of control. Let's just say that I had lost all self-respect. I had lost, I was bankrupt spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. I was lost. I had lost direction. I wasn't even playing music anymore. Getting my next fix and my next pill and my next whatever was a daily mission on an hourly basis, And so I ended up in Las Vegas, out of all places, walking the streets, homeless, without taking a shower, sometimes a weeks at a time, and not even owning an instrument. I had lost my mind, and I lost my spirit. It was just out of control. And there's more details that I could talk to you about that, and how I got in trouble and with the law, and constantly. And so my sister came. The family and family members and friends of the family sent my sister kind of to scout me out, because the girlfriend that I had at the time just couldn't deal with me, and she called, and so she came out to Las Vegas to kind of talk to me, and so she was my salvation, to be honest. She came and got me and talked me into coming to California for a recovery place for 30 days. For 30 days, I would have a place to sleep in. I would have meds so that I wouldn't feel any pain from the detox from heroin and cocaine that can be pretty rough. And some food, and it just sounded to me like a better option than where I was, to be honest. But in the back of my mind, the disease was full on, and I had no intentions on staying sober. It just sounded like a better option for me at the time. And I remember clearly thinking to myself, I said, great, I can go out there for 30 days, get myself back on my feet, get cleaned up, and then I'll go buy a bunch of heroin and a bunch of coke and start selling again, and then get back on my feet, make a bunch of money, because that's what I was doing. It's just insane. The disease of drug addiction and alcohol is just, again, it's another show, and I talk about it. I try to share my story, my experience, my strength, and my hope with other alcoholics and addicts. But it's pretty intense, man. It's a very dark, hopeless, helpless existence, And so I remember coming out. Needless to say, the treatment, the recovery place was very expensive, and the money was paid. It was put together, and it was paid. It was like $22,000, and that's a little chunk,
Oh yeah.
So the seed was planted. The 12-step program was planted inside me, and I realized that there was a better way. I managed to put 8.5 months of sobriety together. And then let's just say that I hooked up with the wrong people. I wasn't really ready. I hadn't surrendered completely. So I put 8.5 months together. I hooked up of sobriety together. And then I hooked up with a few people in the Orange County area that were doing some heavy stuff. And I won't get into what it was, but let's just say there was guns involved and some heavy stuff. And in my insanity, in my lost state of mind, and again, hopeless and helpless, I would just gravitate to anything that would provide me with drugs and alcohol. And after having been exposed to sobriety for 8.5 months, knowing that there was another another way of living, that sobriety was something that was available, but I couldn't manage to put it together, made it even worse, Brad? So I started running. I got in trouble with the law and got thrown in jail. And I was on my way to do, 10 to 15 years in a penitentiary. And pretty scary. What does this have to do with music? I guess all of it. I don't know when you think about it.
Well, it's your journey. It's all part of it.
It is. It's part of exactly. So some letters were put together. Family got a good lawyer, and the judge finally realized that he was looking at my rap sheet and realized that I really had a drug problem, that I had gotten myself on the map as a musician. I had done stuff that was important enough to be noticed, and but I had a big drug and alcohol problem, and so I got in front of the judge, and he said, it's clear to me that you have a big problem here. I'm going to give you one last chance. I remember those words, one last chance, and I'm going to send you to Impact, which is a lockdown recovery place in Pasadena, California. And again, that absolutely saved my life. I was put in there for I think I was supposed to do a year. And this is, you're on probation, formal probation, which means they can, anybody can test you, require a test, a urine test, and if you test dirty, you violate, and then you're gone. And so that's what needed to happen. In addition to that, he assigned me to get on antabuse, which is, the alcohol thing. I don't know if you know what antabuse is.
It makes you sick if you try to drink it, right?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
and that was part of my probation. I had to take that daily, and I had to sign for it, and I had to test urine test, so to let people know that I was sober. And in addition to that, they put me what in those days was called Trexan, which is an opiate blocker, which means I would take it, and no matter how much amount of opiates, whether I would shoot it or snort it or smoke it or eat it, would not influence me. I would not feel the high. So let's just say I look at that as a spiritual awakening of sorts, with a little bit of help of the law, from the law, and and I really believe that it was divine intervention in my life. This is God saying, you're worth saving, you're worth sparing. And the reason for that is I want you to carry the flag to other people out there and let people know that there's a better option. So that's been my walk since then. I completed my probation. I got serious about recovery, and once I got recovery and I got a little bit sane, the music, the passion for music started coming back, and the rest is history. I mean, it's a trip. I put myself. I remember being clear-minded and said, okay, I've really have a bad reputation now, because I was that guy that you could call me to come and play, and I would either show up unprepared, show up late, or not show up at all. And if I showed up, I'd be all whacked on heroin or cocaine that I couldn't put two things together, and it was a mess. So the word gets around not to call this guy because he's a mess. And I use the third person because that's not me anymore. Today I can
Yeah.
actually look. I can actually look back and say, thank God, man. 24 hours a day, I've been able to put 26 years of sobriety together right now. September 20th will be 27 years of nothing, no mind-altering chemicals, no alcohol. I mean, I think about it twice when I have to take ibuprofen and acetaminophen and all that stuff. I prefer not to be under the influence of anything. Of course, we have to from time to time, medical reasons. But so after that, after I got sober, it's so funny. It's really funny how life is, and how, this is how I met Bill Ward from Black Sabbath. Bill Ward, the drummer for Black Sabbath, he was in recovery. And Ozzy, I believe, was in recovery trying to get sober as well. And we used to have a meeting once a week at this recovery place. And he came to me. We were talking about nothing to do with music. I knew who he was, and I think he vaguely knew that I played, and that I was in the business. And we started talking, and one day he just said, Marco, I'm working on a solo album, and this will be my first solo album ever away from Black Sabbath. And I have a few of my friends playing on it. Would you love to play on it? And that was the beginning of me playing. I went and got a bass, put a few bucks together, got a bass. We got together and jammed, and it was really cool. We clicked. But the reason why we clicked, I think, it was because of sobriety. We were on that road together, And I mean, he's an amazing drummer, amazing, who he was, and his legacy, and his his talents and all that. But I think the main reason was sobriety. And so we ended up at the studio. I showed up with my bass, and come to find out that he had, Jack Bruce on that album. He had Tim Bogart on that album. He had Zach Wilde on that album. You know what I mean? Ginger
Yeah.
Baker was playing on a few tracks. It was insane. It was like, whoa, here we go. And I was originally coming to play one track, and I ended up playing five or six, if I remember correctly. So that was the beginning of me getting back in the business, and very cool move. And that kind of gave me the confidence again, and I really appreciated being in the music again, in the music biz. The album came out. We were supposed to tour, and a few things happened. It didn't. It just, things were changing then, and we never did. We never did. The label folded. Chameleon Records folded. But I've been signing a lot of those albums out there. People have them. It's a trip. So it's been quite a journey, but it's funny, how life is. You meet people in sobriety, and then it takes you. There's a lot of twists and turns that happen in your life, And looking back, I'm like, wow, amazing. After that, I got lit up again, and I understood what a privilege and what a what a beautiful thing it was to play music. And now I was clear-minded, and I started putting time again. And to get my confidence together, I took from Buddy Brunel. Buddy Brunel was an amazing bass player. I took some lessons from him. I was already doing gigs where Stanley Clarke was showing up with Sonny Paxson and
Sweet.
in LA. Yeah, man. And George Duke and Al
Holy
Jarreau. And I ended up working with Al Jarreau on some stuff. I ended up working with Edgar Winter. It just moved fast again. It was like I was back on the wheel that was turning, and the wheel was turning real fast.
Now, how did you do that? How did you do that? How did you? Okay, you've destroyed your reputation. You're fresh out of rehab, extended rehab, where lots of people come through and they go either way. How did you quickly rebuild and earn the trust of the musical community?
Well, for me, I had to make sobriety number one, and sobriety required me doing a ton of meetings and staying close to sober people. I had the other side. I had the business and the industry that I would go in, that environment that I would go work under and in, but I stayed away from all the hangs. I'm hanging out with the boys right now, this is the 80s, 86, 87. The rainbow was jumping. Everything was happening. I couldn't hang out in that environment. I would stay away from the parties. And because for the first 5 years, Brian, I understood that if you don't want to get a haircut, you don't go to the barber shop. You know what I mean? Not often enough, because if you hang out in the barber shop, guess what? Sooner or later,
you're in the chair.
Exactly. And that's the way you look at it. And these are little phrases and little cliches that we have in the 12-step program, Stay close to sobriety, stay close to sober people, read the book, do the steps, do the things that will help you stay clean and sober on a daily basis, 24 hours a day. And I did all of that. And I did my 4th and 5th step, and I had a sponsor, and I went to meetings daily. Sometimes I went to 2 and 3 meetings a day because I needed it. Whenever I felt a little weak in the knees, and I'm going, wow, a drink would be nice, or a bump of, or a shot of heroin, or a line of blow, or whatever, I'd go to a meeting. So sobriety became my number one priority. Sobriety allowed me to have the sanity and to have the passion again to want to do something with my music, and started playing. And that's what I did. I would show up. I realized what a privilege it was that I had lost that privilege, and I was getting it back. I was getting the opportunity again to get back in the business. So slowly but surely, I would show up on time. I would take the time to prepare myself. I would shed. I would do everything that's required to be at the top of your game. I would take care of myself. Working out became a compulsive, obsessive behavior of mine, which is great, which is fine. Maybe sometimes too much, but it was good. It was a positive obsession. You know what I mean? And it was productive. Long story short, I put a trio together where I wanted to stretch out as a bass player, as a singer, and started doing every gig possible in LA. And by then, I had done gigs on The Tonight Show with Edgar Winter. I'd done gigs, back in New York with some heavy jazzers and all that. And in the city, in LA with cats like Frank Gambale and Scott Henderson and Dave Weckl. So I was getting more confidence, I was I was playing with some heavy cats, And one day, so I put a trio together where I would challenge myself musically, bass playing wise and singing wise. And it started getting a vibe. We would play every Tuesday night at this little place called Lava Lee on Ventura, which is a few miles away from the Baked Potato. Because we could never get a gig at the Baked Potato because we weren't established, But we started building an audience, and let's just say that in the matter of a year, we became a bit of a buzz in the valley, and anybody and everybody in the business would come in, man. It was a trip. All the people that would tour, that were doing tours around, would come in. There was a buzz, because what we were doing was different, and it was outside the box, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of energy, and the trio was composed of Joey Heredia on drums and Renato Neto on keyboards, who ended up working with Prince. That's another book. But
I bet.
Yeah, but so on and so forth. Reputation started getting around. And in those days, I was playing with that trio. I was playing fretless bass, exclusively fretless. And I got my hands on a 6-string. I went 4-5 to a 6, and having a blast, man. Commercially, it wasn't a viable thing to do, but it was fun, and the rep was out there, and people would come in on Tuesdays. We would pack that place over and over so much that we would get hit every Tuesday from the fire department, man. They'd come in and shut us down. I'm not kidding you, because we were over capacity. It was a little place, it was like 100 people maybe. So we put in like 150, 160 people, and there was lines waiting to come in for the second set. And so the word got out about all of us individually and me as a fretless bass player. And then John Sykes showed up. John Sykes was looking for a fretless bass player.
Of course, yeah.
To replace Tony Franklin on the Blue Murder thing. He had done the first album, an album that I absolutely loved. I knew who he was, so he shows up, and I see him in the audience, and of course we're having a blast. And I get off the stage. We would always do 2 sets, and when we played with that project, we still do that. I kind of dig that. So I got off the stage. He came over to me and introduced himself and said, John Sykes from Blue Murder and Whitesnake and Thin Lizzy. I know who you are, man. Wow, it's really cool to have you here. So, well, long story short, he said, let me get to the point. I'm looking for a fretless bass player to finish. I have a 3-album commitment with Geffen Records, and I need to finish this album. I think I have 2 or 3 tracks. Can you come into the studio next week or so? I said, of course. So long story short, again, went in, and there were some tracks with Tony, and there were some tracks with Carmine, and John and I hit it off, and we did Nothing But Trouble, Geffen, and shortly after touring. So that got me back, let's just say they got me back on track with the rock and roll family and fan base in the rock and roll world in a heavier way. And we toured. I think I ended up doing like 6 albums with John Sykes.
On Nothing But Trouble, how much of that record did you play?
I have to go listen to it. I want to say I did like 8 tracks maybe.
That much, yeah.
Yeah.
It was an interesting time because you returned to rock right after grunge hits. But this album still, well, it's definitely got a cult following now, but it definitely did huge in Japan, right?
Huge. Japan, we'd go out there and do, we'd hit it once, twice a year there. We were doing it consistently. And that was my introduction to Thin Lizzy, because in the set, we would do 3 or 4 Lizzy cuts that John wrote with Phil from the Thunder and Lightning album. We do Cold Sweat, Thunder and Lightning, Please Don't Leave Me, and even Dancing in the Moonlight. So I'm digging the music. We were touring, like I said, we were touring Japan. We did a run in the U.S., and let's just say things were kind of changing for, the grunge thing was coming in, and all the labels went, well, this is what we're going to do now. And I remember doing the last run with Blue Murder in the U.S., and it was successful. to the point where we were supporting the album and people were digging it, but it wasn't promoted right or marketed right, and it was time to just not do it in the U.S. anymore. But that was John's call. He was running that thing, and I think that's a decision he took. So the only other option for him was either Europe and or Japan, and so Japan became his focus, because he would get some. We needed to deliver another album, and so we were busy with that. And so we'd go to Japan and do that. And I can't remember what year. I want to say 91, 92. I remember finishing a run with Blue Murder. And Udo, one of the bigger promoters there in Japan, or the biggest, I should say, we're having his, he would throw a dinner. Every time he'd do a run or a tour, he'd throw a dinner, Kobe beef dinner, and like a ritual kind of thing. It was very cool. And we were there, and he started talking to John about the boys, about Scott Gorham and Brian Downey and Darren Wharton, and asked him if he had been in touch with the cats. And he said, yeah, we talk from time to time. And he brought up the idea of maybe, what do you think about calling them and putting Thin Lizzy together with the remaining members and doing a bit of a tribute for Phil. And John said, yeah, I'll get on it. For me, it was just another conversation, la, la, la. I came home, and I remember getting a call from John. I don't know how much time went by, but let's just say 6, 7, 8 months. And he called me and said, we were working on the third album. He said, Marco, this Thin Lizzy thing is coming together for Japan. We're going to move forward. Would you be interested? And I said, absolutely, So I got my hands on as much Thin Lizzy material that I could get. In those days, there were cassettes and VHS and all that stuff. And I did. I did my homework. I got into it, and I realized how cool it was. I got deep into the catalog, and every track that I heard was better than the last one and better than the last one. It was like, wow. Because by then, being from the West Coast like we were, you're in the West Coast, right, Brian, or not?
Yeah, I'm in Vancouver.
Yeah, Vancouver North. By then, all we got, I don't know what you got, but all we got were the songs that got on the charts, like, Jailbreak and The Boys Are Back in Town, and an occasional Dancing in the Moonlight and some deeper cuts, but that's all we knew, and they were all great. But so I started getting into the catalog, and I fell in love with the songs. I fell in love with the sound, the Celtic vibe. I fell in love with Phil's storytelling, his way of singing and playing the bass, and Scott's playing and Brian's drumming, and it was like, wow, this is really cool. So I showed up, and I think I memorized like 21, 22 tracks and made some notes. In those days, I was still writing charts, just to make sure I was on the same page. And they threw some songs, some deep cuts at me. And let's just say I passed the audition. I came prepared. I did a lot of work. And before you know it, we're in Japan I'm working with Thin Lizzy. It was like, wow. So that was the transition from Blue Murder to Thin Lizzy. And that was in 94.
And how was it received?
It was sold. All the shows were sold out, and we're playing pretty decent venues. And Thin Lizzy and Phil Lynott and the boys really got on the map, on the radar in a big way in Japan. And so it was anticipated, it was promoted right, and it was really cool. And all of a sudden, I became part of the Thin Lizzy family. Fast forward to 96, they were doing an anniversary, the Buy for Philo in Dublin, and a big one at the Point, and everybody was there, anybody and everybody from that area, friends of Phil, friends of the band, and I came and played, and then is when I felt, okay, I'm really part of this thing now, and it became serious. So, and I worked off and on with Thin Lizzy from that point on, up until 2 weeks ago when it became Black Star Riders, But Thin Lizzy it's been part of my journey, a big part of my journey, and a highlight of my rock and roll time,
you've had this long-standing relationship with John Sykes, but you also
Yeah,
have a relationship with Whitesnake. Did that ever get tricky waters to navigate?
it did. It did. And I choose to believe that one of the reasons why I got the call, the initial call, is David Coverdale. He knows what's going on. He loves him. He's a music fan. Not only is he, Mr. David Coverdale with the voice from, that unique sounding voice and his talents, his songwriting and all that, but he's a music fan as well. And I think I got the call because I was getting on the map now. I was doing on the radar in a bigger way. I was working with John. I was doing all these other projects, and he's very meticulous and very picky about people he wants to work with. And he called me one day, and that's another story I won't get into. But initially, I didn't believe it was him calling. I thought it was you hear this story
Yeah, totally.
many times. It's like, oh yeah, this is somebody pulling a prank. But no, it was him calling me. He says, are you around next week? Can you fly up? I'd love to meet you and have a coffee. Come over to my place. I said, of course. So he flew me up, and we had a little meeting and coffee at his pad in Tahoe there, and it was great. And it was all about wanting to know who I was, where I've been, and what I've been doing. And then he offered me the gig, with him, working with him. And I said, of course. So I came back. By then, let's just say that John was doing less and less music and less business. And so there was a lot of time available. And I was starting to get more calls. And I went up there. Let's just say that when he heard that David had called, he wasn't too happy about that. But it is what it is. I went up there, and that was another highlight in my career. Working with David Coverdale, we did that album. I found myself with Danny Carmassi on drums, Earl Slick on the guitar, Doug Bossy on the guitar, David and myself writing, and we came up with Into the Light.
I understand he plans on re-releasing that album. Think that's going to happen?
I think so. David does that. I think he will, and it's a great album, man. It really is. I don't think it got the credit that it deserved, because the label and management. I remember talking to David about it. They really want him to do Whitesnake, and so, long story short, we both got along really, really well. I could consider him a friend, and vice versa, I think, and so we were in touch with each other. He says, when we go out, you're going to be my bass player. You have to be. And so finally, fast forward again, a few years later, he was going out with Whitesnake, and he called me, and we were all set to go out to do a world tour. And my father called me shortly after and said, I need to talk to you, came down. I was living in L.A. by then. I drove down to San Diego, and he told me, he confided in me that he got diagnosed with cancer, terminal cancer, and they gave him 3 months. And again, I called David right away. I said, David, I can't go. I'm sorry. This is something I was so looking forward to it, but my pops, I need to be with my dad. So Tony Franklin, we got Tony Franklin to come in and do that. And I ended up staying at home. And then I got a talk show offered to me for NBC, which worked out perfectly. And so I was driving to LA, taping the show, and then come down and hang out with my dad, and that was it.
Wait, talk show?
Yeah, a talk show. It was called the Fred and Arthel show. It's a talk show in the daytime, and we were the band. We were the house band, and it was really, yeah, which worked out for me because I was still working, but I could come to LA, tape the show. We'd tape 2 shows a day, 2 days in a row, and then I could go and hang out with my dad for the rest of the week. And so that was my thing with David Coverdale and Whitesnake. After that, my father passed away 10 months later, and he stayed in touch. He says, I really want you on the next run. And so that was my connection. Throughout this whole thing, I'm still working with John. And let's just say that I cleared the air with John. I said, John, I'm a bass player. I'm a musician. This is how I live. You know, I wish you two guys could bury the hatchet and get together because you guys did something that's part of music history together, and it would be such an unbelievable thing if you could do that. So he was okay with me working with David, and David was okay with me working with John. I was also working with Ted Nugent and Thin Lizzy. I don't know how it worked out, but it did. And Tommy Aldridge was along with me. It was one of those 2 3 year runs where it was just going and going and going. It was great. I loved it. So I remember getting a call from David saying, what do you think if I call John? And I gave him John's number. I said, DC, this would be great, man. This would be a great move, So I hooked them up. I hooked them up with Tommy Aldridge as well. I threw the phone, and I was talking to Tommy one day, and they hadn't spoken in so many years. And I don't know what we were talking. Tommy and I were talking about something else, and he came in the room. I was up there recording with David, and he came in the room. What's up, darling? What's going on? I said, who's that on the phone? I says, that's Tommy Aldridge. Oh, really? And I just, before he had a chance to think, I gave him the phone. Yeah, here, say hello.
Awesome.
I swear to God, I'll never forget that picture. And there they were, they hadn't spoken in years, and they were like, So they reconnected, and whatever differences they had for whatever, it's always business, Yeah. I really think that all of us and those guys, we learn how to respect each other, and as human beings, we appreciate each other, but then the business end of the music business gets in the way, and then you have to take care of your business, he's got to take care of his business, and then you collide, and it's one of those, and then it's unfortunate, but that's part of the beast, So let's just say they're reconnected, and that's what became, our years there with Whitesnake and David Coverdale. John and Scott would call me back from time to time to go and work with Thin Lizzy, and I would when I was available, and I did. And same with Ted Nugent. It was great, man. It was like, now that you got me thinking about it and talking about it, what a journey, right? It's a trip. Along the way, I've done so many sessions because I still had the session hat on, and played on so many albums and collaborated and sang on so much stuff, and it's like, wow, what a trip.
And you mentioned that David and John at least reconnected a little bit. It didn't turn into anything, though?
It was really close, and I don't have all the specifics, and I don't want to get into it because it's just too much. Let's just say that it got to third base.
Oh.
And it got that far. We were all excited. Tommy he was in, John was in, David, of course, and then I think I was going to be part of it, depending on my schedule. And I told the guys, listen, it's really important. And I am being very sincere with you. I said, it's really important that you two guys get together, whether I'm part of it or not. So I was glad to do that, to kind of be, connect those guys. But in the back of my mind, I was hoping that it'd be me to be part of that lineup. And so then I get the call from David saying, it's not going to work out with John. There's a few guys that I want you to go check for the guitar. And everybody was calling David, and David was calling everybody. I think Lynch and DeMartini and a lot of cats. And then Doug Aldrich was one of those guys. I went to hear him with Ronnie James Dio at Universal Amphitheater, and he was just killing it, man. He sounded amazing. He was playing great. He looked amazing. I met him backstage after the show. He was the nicest, the sweetest cat. And I called David. I said, DC, this is your cat right here, man. And so that was the beginning of that relationship and that connection. And this is my side of the story. This is what I remember. Maybe other people have other stories. I don't know. And that's really possible. But, perceptions are what they are, and they're all different. But that's what happened, man. And we had a great time. Whitesnake, definitely a highlight in my career. And I had a great time. And things started not moving. And I take responsibility for this. Let's just say that things started moving not too fast for my expectations, whether it's right or wrong. And I throughout my years with Whitesnake, I would get so many calls to do all these other projects, major ones, and I would pass because I have this thing called loyalty that is a big part of who I am. I'm very loyal. I don't like to say a lot of things about myself, but I know it's a big part of who I am. And I would let things go. And it got to the point where I started looking at me and started making me and my career a priority. And I started saying yes more often. And we did that little run with John Sykes in Japan, and he ended up recording it and putting out an album, of which we never knew was going to happen. But that kind of, let's just say that was not good for DC, because we were doing a lot of Whitesnake stuff and Thin Lizzy.
And you had Tommy on drums on that too, right?
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
I introduced Derek Sherinian to John, and that became another thing. And it was great. It was I think we did 4 or 5 shows. It was quick. We went in, we rehearsed for 3 days, went in, played. He recorded the whole thing. He made a album deal, released it. I came back home, and then we're out with Whitesnake, and then there it is. Live, Bad Boys, Japan, with John Sykes and Tommy Aldrich and Derek Sherinian playing Whitesnake songs. And DC, I got the call from DC saying, listen, this ain't good for business. You got to refrain from working with some of the alumni. He didn't want to say the name, but some of the alumni, it just doesn't look good. It's not good for biz, et cetera, et cetera. So can you please reconsider next time? And I said, of course. Again, some time lapsed, and I felt I got to the point where I was letting too many things go by. And I came across Neil Sean at the NAMM show. And, Neil Sean, being who he is like, wow. So I got introduced to him. He came and heard me play at the NAMM show, and he called me right away. He says, we got to do this thing. I got this band, man. And it's you and Dean Casanova on drums, Jeff Scott Soto singing, and myself, and you got to come up. So a few weeks later, I came up, and Soul Circus was the project and the band. Another great time. And I think by that time, I had realized that maybe it was time for me to kind of consider all these other projects. And that was, I think DC decided to, he gave me the option to either get involved with all these other projects or stay, kind of exclusive to Whitesnake. And I took the option of taking care of my career and being part of all these opportunities that were coming up. And that was, I think, that was my sign to him saying, I can't hold on. I can't hang out,
Yeah.
I can't hang out and wait until we know what's going on with Whitesnake, because we would go for long periods. So that was it. Next thing you know, I'm out, and next thing you know, I'm out with Thin Lizzy again, and Soul Circus. I ended up doing 2 albums with Dolores O'Riordan from the Cranberries. I've done two solo albums since then. I did the Lynch Mob album, the last one, Smoke and Mirrors, and so many other that I can't think of right now. And I've also been the session guy. I get a lot of calls for sessions now, which is great. And that's part of my journey so far. And now I'm involved with this killer band, the Dead Daisies, who we started working with. I started working with last year. It's John Stevens on vocal and David Lowy, who were the founders of this project. And I was out on tour with Thin Lizzy with Motley Crue and Kiss. in Australia, and I got approached by management asking me if I'd be interested in checking out this project, and I said, of course. So he sent me the music, and I heard John sing, and I'm going, whoa! And I heard the songs, and I'm going, whoa, whoa! And I did, man. It just it just hit a spot. It pushed my buttons in the right way, you know. Being a singer, somewhat that I do, I appreciate, you know, the insane singer that John is. I went, wow! I saw a few YouTube clips, and they called me and they said, well, this thing's moving forward. We got an opportunity to support Aerosmith here in Australia. You want to come up, you know, come on board? And I said, absolutely. And that started a buzz with the band. We got together and it just happened. The chemistry was there. The mutual respect was there, that we were having fun again. It was really great. And in a short span of time, here we are, you know. We got invited to do, I know Tyler was really digging it, and all the, all the other boys from Aerosmith were digging it and going, wow, this is an interesting project. And so we got invited to do the Rockstar Uproar tour last summer in the U.S. So we came from there to do the U.S. With Alice in Chains and Jane's Addiction, and that got us on the radar even bigger, in a bigger way. And now we're here with Lynyrd Skynyrd and Bad Company. You know, a new album ready to come out here in a few months. We have some singles out. The Face I Love, got to check it out. The deaddaisies.com and marcomendoza.com, and the journey continues, Brian.
You've played with all these huge bands. How is it now to be involved in a project from the get-go?
I really dig it. And well, I was involved with the Black Star Riders, which is the son of, I like to call it the son of Thin Lizzy.
True enough.
I was involved in that process. And to me, that's the ultimate, to be part of the process from the bottom up and then play it on the big stage and have people sing along with it. And that's the ultimate. As an artist, as a musician, that's the pat on the back, you know. So the same thing happened here. I mean, they had an album together where they use studio musicians. And the first time we got together, the writing process began, because you got a bunch of cats here with a lot of years of experience and wanting to write and be creative constantly. And so it was good, man. It was it's been a great run here with the Daisies, and we're going to do show number 3 tonight. We've done 2. And what's most amazing to me, man, is like we get together, we rehearse for 2 days, and the set's done, and then we decide last minute, let's play some new songs that we haven't recorded yet. Let's put them to the test, like old school.
That's
I love
great.
that. And so we're backstage trying to get the lyrics together and trying to put the songs together, and then we play it on the big stage and people are digging it, and that's it. That's the ultimate right there. So given the choice, that's what I would do. Be part of something that starts from the bottom up, you know, and represent like that, because it's part of the journey. The ultimate fix for me is to do that. You know, I don't use drugs or alcohol. I get up on stage and I do music and I play with my friends and share music and life together. You know, that's the ultimate high for me now. You know.
So with 27 years anniversary coming up, how do you keep that train going straight?
I just, you know, there's no doubt in my mind, Brian. I can't. People listening out there. There's a lot of people that understand that are into recovery, or people that are still struggling with it. You know, I'm here to tell all those people that to share my experience, strength, and hope with them. That if somebody that got so deep in the trenches, I was in the gutter, below the gutter, man. I was gone. If somebody like me can bounce back and you know, and completely. I completely gave up the fact that I had any kind of control over alcohol and drugs. You know, you kind of you have to turn it over to something. And for me, it was a higher power, God, for me. And for me, it was surrendering to the 12-step program and being willing to take direction and achieve what other people in sobriety had achieved, which was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of sobriety. I wanted that. I wanted it so bad, so I surrendered. And I'm here to fly that flag to say, listen, I know it's bad. I remember. I don't ever want to forget. I still get chills when I think about what I was doing out there. It was insane. If somebody like me can come out of that insane world and put 26 years of sobriety, 24 hours a day at a time, and not have a drink or a pill or a smoke or a shot because I was IV, I was shooting heroin and cocaine for this long, anybody could do it. The beginning factor, the core issue is how bad do you want to, and how ready are you to achieve sobriety, you know? So I believe I was spared to do that, and that's why I insist on talking about it. That's part of my journey, you know? And I got to tell you, man, there's nothing better. There's no better high than to be in front of 110,000 people, man, at Download most recently, and playing music and having the roar of the audience coming back to you. I just got a chill right now. Coming back to you from, I'm serious. It's insane. The power, you know, it's very powerful. There's no better high. Adrenaline rush, endorphins, all of the above. It's like, that's the real high. And I'm addicted to that. I'm addicted to being in the studio and, you know, with my friends and talented cats, surrounded by these cats, and the song comes together and the groove comes together, and it's just wow. And then we record it, then we rehearse it, and then we play it in front of thousands of people. It's like, wow. There's nothing better than that, you know?
I cannot thank you enough for sharing your story.
No, it's true, man. And we could get deeper into it, but I will say this. The only thing that gets close is, you know, watching my son get on the surfboard a few weeks ago, and my daughter get on the surfboard. I got chills again. My daughter Faith, that's 11 years old, and my son Max at 7, out there in Orange County, man, surfing. Little things like that. It's almost like you're reborn and you have all your senses back, you know. I started learning how to cry in sobriety. I remember not being able to. I'm now a little girly, man. I could be sitting at a movie and start crying about, you know, it's beautiful, man. And I can taste food better, and I can smell beautiful bouquets, and it's amazing. It's almost like I'm present 100 times more. You know what I'm saying? It's surrounded by light and nothing but good things, man. It's amazing. I hope you understand where I'm coming from. I hope I'm not getting too deep, but I love my life. I love who I am. I know it sounds pretentious, but it is what it is. I love it. I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I'm surrounded by light, you know. I just got to stay away from that first drink and that first freaking heroin shot and that first pill. I have to. I don't ever want to be back there again, you know. So I do meetings when I can. I share my story with friends when I can. I talk about my sobriety when people really want to know about it. And then I share my story as much as I can, like I'm with you. You know, it's very important. That's part of my journey, and I'm sticking to it.
Brilliant.
True.
And that was Marco Mendoza sharing his story. Pretty inspiring guy. The Double Stop is now joined up with some of my favorite rock podcasts at thecastIronring.com. So go over and check it out, because there's always lots of great episodes by shows like Focus on Metal, Wiki Metal, Radioactive Metal, all kinds of good stuff. That's it for another show. We'll see you next time on The Double Stop.